June Carter's mother didn't believe in second chances. Mother Maybelle Carter had spent 40 years in the music business. She'd seen every kind of man Nashville had to offer. The drunks, the cheaters, the charmers who promised the world and delivered nothing. She'd watched her daughter's first marriage fall apart. She'd seen June's heart broken more times than she cared to count. And now June was in love with Johnny Cash, a pill addict, a man who showed up to concerts so intoxicated he couldn't remember the words to his own songs. A performer who'd been arrested 7 times in 4 years. A walking disaster who happened to be one of the most talented people Mother Maybelle had ever met. It was 1967. June and Johnny had been performing together for 6 years. They'd recorded duets. They'd toured the country. And everyone who saw them on stage knew they were in love. Everyone except June's mother thought it was a good idea. What happened next, in a backstage dressing room in Canton, Ohio, on a cold November night, would determine whether Johnny Cash lived or died. But to understand why Mother Maybelle Carter held that much power, you have to understand who she was, and what the Carter family name actually meant. The Carter family wasn't just another country music act, they were the foundation. In 1927, A.P. Carter, his wife Sarah, and his sister-in-law Maybelle traveled to Bristol, Tennessee, for a recording session that would later be called the Big Bang of country music. The songs they recorded, Wildwood Flower, Keep on the Sunny Side, Can the Circle Be Unbroken, became the blueprint for everything that came after. Mother Maybelle wasn't just a singer, she was a revolutionary guitarist. Her thumb brush technique, where she played melody on the bass strings while brushing rhythm on the treble strings, influenced every country guitarist who came after her, including Chet Atkins and Merle Travis. By the 1960s, the original Carter family had dissolved, but Maybelle kept the name alive. She performed with her daughters, Helen, Anita, and June. They were country music royalty. They played the Grand Ole Opry. They had their own TV show. They were respectable. And then June fell in love with Johnny Cash. June Carter met Johnny Cash in 1956, backstage at the Grand Ole Opry. She was married at the time to Carl Smith, a country singer. Cash was married too to Vivian Liberto, his high school sweetheart. But something happened when they met. June would later describe it as terrifying. Not because Cash was dangerous, but because the connection was immediate and undeniable. She knew, standing there in a crowded hallway in Nashville, that this man was going to change her life. She was right. By 1961, both of their marriages were falling apart. June divorced Carl Smith. Cash's marriage to Vivian was disintegrating under the weight of constant touring, infidelity, and Cash's escalating drug use. And June found herself pulled into Cash's orbit. At first, it was professional. She joined his touring show. They recorded duets. Jackson, released in 1967, became a massive hit. On stage, their chemistry was electric. Off stage, it was chaos. Cash was addicted to amphetamines, uppers that kept him awake for days at a time. He'd take handfuls of pills before concerts, during concerts, after concerts. He'd disappear for days. He'd crash cars. He'd get arrested for smuggling drugs across the Mexican border. June tried to help him. She'd flush his pills down the toilet. She'd drag him out of hotel rooms when he was too high to stand. She'd cover for him on stage when he forgot lyrics or stumbled through performances. But she wouldn't marry him. Johnny Cash proposed to June Carter multiple times. The exact number is disputed. Some say 4, some say more. Each time, June said no. Not because she didn't love him, but because she knew that marrying an addict wouldn't save him. It would just make her complicit in his self-destruction. Cash didn't understand. From his perspective, marriage was the solution. If June would just commit to him, he'd have a reason to get clean. He'd have stability. He'd have something worth fighting for. But June had been down this road before. Her first husband, Carl Smith, had his own demons. Her second husband, Edwin "Rip" Nix, was a Nashville police officer who seemed stable, until the marriage collapsed under the pressure of June's touring schedule and Rip's resentment of her career. June wasn't going to make the same mistake again, and her mother made sure of it. Mother Maybelle Carter didn't mince words. She told June, repeatedly,
that marrying Johnny Cash would be the biggest mistake of her life. "That man is going to kill himself," Maybelle said. "And if you marry him, you'll be standing there watching when he does it." It wasn't cruelty. It was pragmatism. Maybelle had watched Cash deteriorate over the years. She'd seen him show up to concerts barely able to function. She'd seen the arrests, the hospitalizations, the near-death experiences. In 1965, Cash had been arrested in El Paso for smuggling hundreds of amphetamine and barbiturate pills across the border from Juarez. He'd hidden them in his guitar case. When customs agents searched him, they found 1,163 pills. In 1966, his truck caught fire in Los Padres National Forest in California, accidentally starting a wildfire that burned 508 acres and killed 49 endangered condors. Cash showed up to court and made jokes about it. This wasn't a man on the verge of turning his life around. This was a man circling the drain. And Maybelle wasn't going to let her daughter go down with him.
By late 1967, things were getting worse. Cash's drug use had reached a crisis point. He was taking amphetamines and barbiturates in dangerous combinations. Uppers to stay awake, downers to come down, uppers to wake back up again. His weight had dropped to 155 pounds on a 6-foot frame. His skin was gray. His hands shook constantly. June was exhausted. She loved him, but she was watching him die slowly, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. And then came Canton, Ohio. November 11, 1967. Cash was scheduled to perform at the Canton Memorial Civic Center. June and the Carter family were on the bill, as they always were. Cash showed up late, high, barely coherent. June found him in the dressing room, slumped in a chair, unable to focus his eyes. She'd seen him like this before, but something about this night felt different, more desperate, more final. She called her mother. Mother Maybelle Carter walked into that dressing room like a woman on a mission. She looked at Johnny Cash, skeletal, shaking, barely present. And then she looked at her daughter. "June," she said, "go wait outside." June hesitated. "Go." June left. What happened in that room over the next 20 minutes, no one knows for sure. Cash never spoke about it publicly. June only mentioned it in vague terms years later. Mother Maybelle took it to her grave, but people who were nearby, band members, stagehands, reported hearing raised voices. Not yelling, but firm, direct. When the door finally opened, Mother Maybelle walked out first. She found June in the hallway. "I told him," Maybelle said, "that if he wants to marry you, he has one chance, and only one." June waited. "He has to get clean, not for a week, not for a month, long enough to prove he means it. And if he can do that, if he can actually stay sober, then I won't stand in your way." June stared at her mother. "And if he can't?" Maybelle's face didn't change. "Then you walk away, for good." Mother Maybelle Carter didn't just tell Johnny Cash to get sober. She gave him a timeline. 90 days. 3 months of complete sobriety. No pills, no relapses, no exceptions. If Cash could prove he was serious, if he could actually stay clean for 90 consecutive days, then Maybelle would give her blessing for him to marry June. If he couldn't, June would leave the tour, leave his life, move on. It was an ultimatum. And Johnny Cash, sitting in that dressing room, still half high and barely able to process what was happening, agreed. He didn't have a choice. Losing June wasn't an option. She was the only thing in his life that felt real, the only person who saw him as something other than a commodity or a problem to manage. But agreeing to get sober and actually getting sober were two very different things. Cash tried. For about 2 weeks. He threw away his pills. He told his band he was done. He showed up to concerts sober, or at least not visibly intoxicated. But the withdrawal was brutal. Amphetamine withdrawal doesn't just make you tired. It makes you depressed, anxious, paranoid. Your body aches. You can't sleep, but you're exhausted all the time. Food tastes like cardboard. Music sounds flat. And for someone like Johnny Cash, whose entire identity was built on performance, the idea of going on stage without chemical assistance was terrifying. 2 weeks in, he relapsed. Not a full relapse, just a handful of pills to take the edge off, enough to get through a concert. But June knew. She always knew. She didn't say anything, didn't lecture him, just looked at him backstage with an expression that made it clear. The clock had reset. 90 days, starting over. In early December 1967, Johnny Cash disappeared. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He just got in his car and drove. He ended up at Nickajack Cave, a massive cave system on the Tennessee River near the Alabama-Georgia border. Cash would later describe what happened next as the lowest point of his life. He crawled into the cave with the intention of never coming out. Not suicide exactly, but surrender. He wanted to crawl into the darkness and let it take him. Let the pills wear off. Let exhaustion take over. Let whatever was going to happen, happen. He crawled for hours, deeper and deeper into the cave, until his flashlight died. And then he just lay there, in total darkness, waiting to die. But something happened. Cash described it as a spiritual experience. A voice, not audible but present, telling him that his life wasn't over, that he still had work to do. He crawled back out. It took hours. He scraped his hands raw on the rocks. He nearly passed out from exhaustion. But when he emerged from the cave, he made a decision. He was done. Not done trying, done running. Cash went to June, told her what had happened, told her he was ready, but he couldn't do it alone. June called her mother, and Mother Maybelle did something unexpected. She opened her home. For the next several weeks, Johnny Cash lived with the Carter family in Madison, Tennessee. It wasn't a rehab facility. There were no doctors, no therapists, just Maybelle, June, and the rest of the family watching him, keeping him accountable. When Cash couldn't sleep, Maybelle sat with him. When he wanted to leave, June talked him down. When the cravings got unbearable, they'd put him to work, chopping firewood, fixing fences, anything to keep his hands busy. It was brutal. There were days when Cash screamed at them, days when he begged for just one pill, days when he threatened to walk out and never come back, but they didn't let him. And slowly, painfully slowly, something started to shift. It's hard to say exactly when Cash hit the 90-day mark, because the timeline wasn't clean. There were stumbles, moments of weakness, days when he took a pill, then hated himself for it, then started the count over. But by early 1968, something was different. Cash wasn't just sober, he was present. He started writing again. Not the scattered, amphetamine-fueled bursts of lyrics he'd scribbled on napkins at 3 a.m., but real songs, structured, thought out. He started showing up to rehearsals on time, started remembering lyrics, started looking people in the eye again. And June noticed. So did Maybelle. One evening in late January 1968, Mother Maybelle pulled Johnny Cash aside. They were at the Carter house. June was in the kitchen. The house was warm, quiet. Maybelle looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You did it." Cash didn't respond. "I didn't think you would, but you did." She paused. "You can marry my daughter." It wasn't a grand moment, no music, no tears, just a simple acknowledgement. But for Johnny Cash, it was everything. February 22, 1968. Johnny Cash was performing at the London Ice House in London, Ontario, Canada. Midway through the show, he stopped, looked at June, who was standing off to the side of the stage. "June," he said into the microphone, "will you marry me?" The audience went silent. June froze. This wasn't the first time he'd asked, but it was the first time he'd asked sober. She looked at him, really looked at him, and then she smiled. Yes. The crowd exploded. Johnny Cash and June Carter were married on March 1, 1968 in Franklin, Kentucky. It was a small ceremony. Family and close friends. No press, no spectacle. Mother Maybelle was there. She didn't give a speech, didn't make a scene, just stood quietly in the back, watching her daughter marry the man she'd almost forbidden her from seeing. People asked her, later, if she regretted giving Cash the ultimatum. She said no, because the man who married June that day wasn't the same man she'd confronted in Canton, Ohio. That man had been dying. This man had fought his way back. Johnny Cash stayed sober. Not perfectly, There were relapses over the years, moments of weakness, struggles with painkillers later in life, but he never went back to the person he'd been in 1967, and he credited two people for that: June and Mother Maybelle. June became his anchor, his partner, the person who kept him grounded when the darkness crept back in. But it was Maybelle who'd forced the issue. Maybelle who'd drawn the line. Maybelle who'd refused to let her daughter marry a man who was killing himself. In interviews years later, Cash would say, "Maybelle Carter saved my life, not June. June loved me, but Maybelle? She didn't love me. She just refused to let me waste June's life along with my own." It was the truth, and it was the kindest thing anyone had ever done for him. Mother Maybelle Carter continued performing into the 1970s. She toured with Johnny and June. She played the Opry. She recorded albums. But privately, her health was declining. In 1978, she was diagnosed with respiratory failure. She spent her final months in and out of hospitals. Johnny visited her as often as he could. One afternoon, sitting by her bedside, he thanked her for the ultimatum, for refusing to let him off easy, for loving June enough to risk losing her. Maybelle smiled. "You proved me wrong," she said. "I didn't think you had it in you." Cash laughed. "Neither did I." Mother Maybelle Carter died on October 23, 1978. Johnny Cash performed at her funeral. He sang "Will the Circle Be Unbroken?", the song the original Carter family had recorded 50 years earlier. His voice broke halfway through. The story of Mother Maybelle's intervention isn't just about addiction and recovery. It's about the people who love addicts, the people who have to make impossible decisions, who have to choose between enabling someone they care about and drawing a line that might push them away forever. Maybelle didn't save Johnny Cash. Cash saved himself. But Maybelle created the conditions that made it possible. She refused to let him have June without proving he was serious. She didn't accept promises. She demanded action. And when Cash stumbled, when he relapsed, when he disappeared into a cave, when he nearly gave up, she didn't abandon him. She opened her home. She gave him structure. She held him accountable. That's not romantic. It's not cinematic, but it's real. Johnny and June Cash were married for 35 years. June died on May 15, 2003, following complications from heart surgery. Johnny died 4 months later on September 12, 2003. In the final years of his life, Cash recorded a series of albums with producer Rick Rubin. They were stripped down, raw, honest. One of the last songs he recorded was a cover of 9 Inch Nails' "Hurt." The music video shows Cash, old and frail, sitting in a house full of memories, surrounded by photos of June, relics of a life lived. When the video was released, Trent Reznor, who wrote the original song, said, "That song isn't mine anymore. It's his." Because Johnny Cash understood something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Redemption isn't a moment. It's a process. And it only works if someone loves you enough to demand more from you than you think you're capable of. Mother Maybelle Carter did that. She demanded more. And Johnny Cash spent the rest of his life trying to live up to it.